Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hi, I'm Rory, and with me, as always, is Ken. How are you today, Ken?
I'm grateful to be here, Rory. Good to see you again, Rory, and great that you, our listeners, are tuning in. You've joined us at episode 176 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. We're grateful that you are here. We're going to be going through three different topics, starting with our student check-in, where we kind of look at something that students may come across in their studies. And we're going to be speaking about immediacy today, working with immediacy. And the reason for that is we get a lot of questions from students that struggle with that as it being quite an advanced skill. We're then going into our second section, which is the digital counselling revolution, where we're going to be speaking about self-care when working online and how that differs, how we really need to take extra care with self-care if we are doing any online or telephone work. And then we're going to be ending with practice matters, where we're going to look at hard to help clients. So starting us off, student check-in, working with immediacy.
Yes, and this is a question that's come up in our Facebook page. And if you don't know about our Facebook page, go to Facebook, type in Counselling Tutor, you'll find us. We're a closed group, but if you knock on the door, of course, we're going to let you in. And there's thousands of people interested in the world of counselling and psychotherapy. It includes students, it includes qualified colleagues, supervisors. There's a smattering of tutors in there, and all sorts of questions are asked. And if you're not in there, you should be, because it's where it's all going on. And one of the questions that comes up is trying to work out what this skill of immediacy is. It's an interesting skill, and it really comes under the heading of patterns of relating, Ken.
Yeah, I think that you're right there, Roy. And I think it's a misunderstood skill, specifically amongst students when they're kind of studying immediacy. And I think we'll start off with a dry textbook description. So I'm quoting here from Feltham and Dryden, 1993, 88, page 88. Describe immediacy as the key skill of focusing attention on the here and now relationship of the counsellor and the client with helpful timing in order to challenge defensiveness and or heighten awareness. And just taking that kind of just textbook description, it's no wonder that it is a confusing skill to get your heads around, because we're speaking about focusing, we're speaking about challenge, we're speaking about the here and now. There's a lot to it when you kind of break it down.
Absolutely. And immediacy is that sense of when you're working with a client and all of a sudden you're aware of something maybe unsaid between you and the client. Maybe the client is being very defensive or is attacking you. I mean, we're not talking about physically attacking here, obviously, but maybe saying, I can remember a comment from one of my students many years ago, where she was working with a client. This is a long time ago. And the client said, "I've been let down by women like you." And the immediacy there was, and I have to take my hat off to this student at the time. She said, it feels like you're attacking me for the problems you've had in the past. And it really did break new ground between her and the client. The client said, "No, I'm not saying it's you." And that led on then to an exploration. Is it just the women he's met? Is it all women? Or was it just that maybe there was something he was doing that impacted on relationships and how women related to him? So it is a very, very, very useful skill. And sometimes lack of trust is an issue that comes up in counselling. Certainly we meet clients who maybe struggle to trust. It may be an issue of attachment. They may have a avoidant attachment. And sometimes if it becomes apparent that there is a lack of trust in the relationship, therapist may say, or counsellor may say, "I'm wondering how easy it is for you to trust me in this time." And it's always an invitation to explore, I think. I think immediacy done correctly should always be an invitation, Ken.
Yep, definitely. And so my understanding of immediacy is that it's a instance within a counselling relationship where we may step out of the client's frame of reference. Now, this is tricky because we're called on in person-centered therapy to be within the client's frame of reference. We're kind of standing next to them, seeing the world as they see it. When we act from a position of immediacy, we will step outside of the client's frame of reference. It's still going to be relevant to what the client is bringing. Don't get me wrong here, but we're going to be, for a moment, in our own frame of reference. We're actually going to share a bit of self. So the counselor is sharing something that comes up within them that may not necessarily relate to what the client's frame of reference is. And that's where the challenge comes in within immediacy, because it's not what the client is naturally bringing. And it can be described as a gut feel that you may get. And it's not always a challenge in the way that you described the last situation, Rory, where you might directly challenge the client. It can be a challenge in a different way, in a softer way. So I'll give you an example of that. Counselor working with the client, a male client, explaining something and bringing some narrative. And as you, the counselor, are sitting looking at this, what you're actually feeling is you say, wow, as he's saying this, it's almost like he's a little boy saying this. I'm not seeing the grown man in front of me. I'm feeling this gut feel of this is coming from a child position. And then the therapist daring to say, and that's the thing about immediacy, you dare to say when you're using immediacy, you know what, as you're saying that, it almost feels to me like it's coming from the position of a little boy. And that it is a challenge. It's a challenge for that person to kind of explore that and see how that fits for them. And there's kind of three ways that could go. The client may accept what you're saying and go, you know what, you're right. I actually can feel that within myself, and there's a movement there. And that's why immediacy is such an effective skill. It's an advanced skill, I have to say, but when it hits right, it can be really effective in bringing movement within the therapy relationship. But the client may just as well look at you all confused and look like they've just really been disturbed from what they were bringing. They were on this within their frame of reference. You've pulled them out and you can see that doesn't fit at all, and that's when immediacy can go wrong. And that's why immediacy should only be used when the relationship is well developed, when trust and rapport is developed within that relationship. And if you do use immediacy and you can see that it didn't hit, and then the way to work with that is you work with congruence. You say, I can see I certainly got that wrong. How does it feel to you? So you give it back to them to kind of bring you back into the frame of reference. And then the third way that the client may react in this example we've used is they may, first of all, appear a little bit startled by it and maybe start denying it. But as they kind of start exploring that, find that comes into their awareness, you know what? I know what you mean. I can remember when I was a little boy acting the same kind of way. So that is immediacy, an example of how you can use the challenge in a softer way, I guess, and what to do if immediacy kind of goes a little bit off track.
Absolutely can. And also it can address, and I used the metaphor, the elephant in the room. If you're, I've worked with a lot of female clients in the past, and I've often said to female clients, I wonder how hard it is for you to talk to a male about the abuse another man has put on you. And sometimes clients will say, no, it's fine, and other times they'll say, well, actually, yeah, it is very hard, because every time I'm sat here, I'm reminded of what's happened, and that gives you then an opportunity to work through. In that case, there may be some transference. Couldn't get away with podcast without mentioning transference again, where somebody from the, you see someone new, but you're reminded of someone from the past, essentially, and it gives you an opportunity to talk that through and say, well, I'm not that person, and I'm here for you to hear you and to help you. And sometimes it can just break the ice a bit. It's a useful skill, but as Ken said, I would totally agree. It's not one for the initial stages of therapy. It's one for maybe when the relationship's established.
Yes, and we've got a handout for you. It's a handout on immediacy. It can give you an overview. And to get that handout, it's one of Rory's super duper handouts, as we call them. Really, really useful. And the reason they're so useful is it's not just a page full of text. Rory really takes time to kind of pull the essence of what the handout is about, break it down into bullet points. So it's really easy to reference. And if you want to get hold of the handout on immediacy, you can get that for free from our website, which is counsellingtutor.com. Go online, type in Counselling Tutor. You'll find us there. Go to our podcasts tab because you're listening to a podcast right now and you're looking for episode 176. You'll see that on the podcast page. Go to episode 176 and on that page you'll find the notes from the episode that we're delivering right now, and you'll find the free handout on examples of immediacy in counselling, and you can grab that with our compliments. And that's our free resource. Of course, we do offer a paid for resource library as well, with lectures and resource for students on counselling courses. And within our CSR, as we call it, Counselling Study Resources, we have a great lecture on immediacy and a lot of resources on immediacy as well. And if you are a member of CSR, just log in and put in the search immediacy or go to the skills section in lectures and it's there. If you're not a member of CSR, you can get information about that at our website, counsellingtutor.com. So as we move away now from our student check-in, we recognize that technology now forms a part in how counselling is delivered, how counselling is received. We go into our section called Digital Counselling Revolution, where we're going to be looking at self-care when working online.
Digital Counselling Revolution.
Well, it's come as no surprise in these difficult times, and I'm talking difficult times at the time this recording was made, we're still in the height of the COVID pandemic here in the UK, and indeed the rest of the world is gripped by this terrible virus. And of course, lots of colleagues have gone to online working. One of the things that's becoming obvious is that online working is actually more demanding than working face-to-face. Ken and myself are recording a podcast here, and in fact, we're kind of emulating, to a certain extent, what we would do if it was an online counselling session, because Ken is 40 miles away from me. He's in his workspace, his studio. I'm in mine. And we've had to navigate quite a bit of technology to do the podcast. And the same thing can happen when you're working online. After all, client has to come online. You have to come online. You have to make sure that your computer is connected, that your microphone works. If you're using a video camera, that your video camera works, your background. And also, you really do have to really pay attention to the technical issues when you're working online. And it can be very, very demanding. And I've spoken to quite a few counsellors who've said they could quite easily do, say, 5 clients in a day with, say, 20-minute break. But they can't do that when they're working online. They find it so demanding. And I'm guessing, and the research eventually will bear this out probably if someone does research, is that because you're attending to a lot of the other aspects of the technology, having to work in 2 dimensions, not 3 dimensions, maybe having to try to see your clients. I know that, sometimes lighting can be difficult in clients' houses. So you may not be able to see the entire client. You're not seeing the entire body of the client. So non-verbal communication, a key kind of indicator that can be used in counselling, isn't available. It can be very, very demanding. And a lot of therapists are now saying that they prefer to just take longer breaks or maybe see less clients in the day. And of course, if you're a counsellor who's doing primarily phone work, just focusing on a voice on the phone is incredibly demanding. I don't know if you've ever experienced having a very long phone conversation with someone, Ken, where it's very, very detailed. It can be very, very demanding, can't it? It can be physically draining sometimes.
Very much so. Thinking of that self-care, and you're quite rightly kind of focusing on what would make it different from face to face. And when you're speaking about listening to somebody on the phone, or even if you do have kind of a video connection with that person, cutting out so much of how we communicate. A very large percent of how we communicate is non-verbally. It's by our facial expressions, it's by how we move our hands, it's by how we hold ourselves within the space. With that being cut off, you kind of required to listen in a very different way. And listening in that different way brings fatigue. It tires you out, and it tires you out differently to when you're with a person face to face. If you think about it, biologically, we're created to communicate with people in close proximity, where we can see them, we can hear them, we can see how they move. So it's not natural for us to listen digitally, listen online. Just the process of wearing headphones can tire you out. You've got a pressure on your head. You're hearing differently. The sound is completely different from headphones than it would be from a voice of a person right in front of you. You're having to concentrate and use different parts of your brain, specifically when you're first going online, parts of your brain that haven't developed those skills yet, and it can really wear you out. And it's really worth thinking about the breaks that you take. Also, by the very nature of the fact that you may be sitting in front of a screen, if you're working with video, you have pixels and light coming from the screen. There is a certain glare, a certain quality of light that glares from the screen, which is fatiguing on the eyes. So you've got that coming at you as well. And we may not be consciously aware of this, but you may just feel run down, lack of energy at the end of sessions. And these are all the build-ups. And I think, Rory, you've already mentioned the breaks. Breaks are so important. So you wouldn't be wanting to leave just 10 minutes before your next client comes in. You don't want to be putting in a decent time for you to get up, walk around, go outside, get some fresh air, see a tree, touch some grass, and have a little bit of time to kind of get back into the analog world as it was before you put yourself back into a digital world. Because in a way, you sat on your own in a room for hours and hours and hours when you're working digitally. So rests, yes, and recognizing those breaks, how to use them. And then the other thing I might suggest is the importance, when you're talking about self-care, of having a supervisor who understands this. And so often we're asked, so if I'm working online, do I really need a supervisor who's done an online course? And the answer is yes, you do. If you want to fully service your clients and be fully serviced yourself as a counselor and be at your best, yes, you should really look for a supervisor who at least understands online work, who understands the additional requirements that are put on you.
Yes, absolutely. And you're absolutely right, Ken. Having the correct supervision from someone who can really understand what you're going through and doing the work themselves is absolutely essential. And I think there's some other things that are quite different when we're working online. Most people sit in an office chair, as opposed to in a therapy room. They usually have quite comfortable chairs. Some people have sofas and lovely decorations, lots of light. Well, hopefully you can have that in your own home or wherever you're working from. But things like seating, if you're sat in an office chair for a long period of time, they're not designed to be super luxurious. I mean, you can buy super luxurious chairs, but that's an issue. And I also think that sometimes just the endings in counselling, when we end in a face-to-face session, we usually walk the client to the reception and we say our goodbyes. It can be quite immediate in online. You just either switch the phone off, say goodbyes and switch the phone off, or just turn the video link off. And I think all that has an impact. So as Ken said, be thoughtful of that. If you feel it, take it to supervision, work through it, because self-care is an ethical imperative. It's being well in ourselves is in itself a service to our clients.
Indeed. Part of self-care as a counsellor is that recommendation that we kind of network and speak with peers, with fellow counsellors who can understand how it is for us. Now, I'm not talking about sharing client work. I'm just talking about sharing the day-to-day parts of running a practice. And when working online, there is the opportunity to join an online group of peers that are there to support you, that understand the rigors of kind of working online. Rory and I, in Counselling Tutor, we have built a course, online telephone counselling course. We've had over 10,000 therapists take that course, and we have created a group, an online and telephone counselling group. And the conversations that go on within that group, not related to clients, I have to add, just related to working online. It's really interesting to see the supportiveness of one another as they're kind of being there for one another, just discussing it. So speaking to someone who gets it, who understands what you're going through, can also be restorative. I never know. I always put too many T's in that word, I think. It's restorative. A restorative action, having a chat with somebody just about work. How was work? How it's going? And, it's difficult for us as therapists. We often can't go to our families and talk about how it is in work because there is the confidentiality, and would they really understand it? So there is another opportunity for self-care, is to network and chat with peers, maybe in an online setting.
Yes, absolutely. It's really important at times like this that we keep connected with colleagues, and we keep speaking to them. I think one of the self-care challenges in this time is battling isolation. I think people are feeling isolated enough, but if you're doing the work we do, it's really important, I think, to get regular supervision, as I've said, but also hook up with colleagues just to get a sense of how they're feeling it, so you don't feel that you're on your own.
Yeah, and then of course the self-care principles that would kind of apply to face-to-face therapy all come into play as well. Exercise, eating, having an activity that restores you, whether that be horse riding, dog walking, meditating, whatever that is, of course. And I say these things, and of course they apply to face-to-face as much as they apply to online. But as soon as we go online, because of that change in working, and Rory, you said it, of when you're in face-to-face therapy, you may be getting up, walking through, meeting your client, bringing your client through. You may be talking to the other people in the practice or the office. You may be bringing them through, having the session, walking them back out again. And then you may go to a more formal desk, maybe to write your notes up before the next client comes in. When we're working online, we find ourselves at that more formal desk for the whole time. We're doing our sessions at that more formal desk. There is no walking around. There's no going to greet someone and going back again. You're finishing with a client. You're basically staying at that more formal desk and going straight into maybe writing up your client notes from the session you've had. So those breaks, that stretch the leg, that get some fresh air, become so much more important. And of course, the activities that regenerate you. I know that when we went into COVID, Rory, for myself, and I just speak for myself here, just the process of needing to be online a lot more, I found that my regular self-care routine started suffering from that without me knowing. They kind of just slipped away, and it was but we've got to do this at the moment. We've got to do this. And there was a change, and I didn't make allowance for that. And you'll know, Rory, because I spoke to you, because I reach out to peers. It started affecting me. It started wearing me down. Yeah. It really did. And I needed to take a break. I needed to take some time out to kind of reset and go, this is a whole different way of working. And I'm now gladly been able to reinstate all of the things that make me well. In fact, Rory, just before the recording of our podcast this morning, I went out for my run.
Well, there you have it. You can't get better self-care than that. And I think one final plea, there'll be a lot of students who may be listening to this who may just be starting in their practice. And traditionally, of course, you'd go to your agency, you'd wait for your client, nervously wait for your clients. I'm talking about my own experience here. Go through all that kind of am I good enough routine that regularly happens when you're a new therapist with your first client. And then, of course, you'd meet the client, you'd work with the client. And then usually it wouldn't be, in my experience, it wouldn't be unusual for the therapist to kind of professionally wave the client goodbye, and then look for a peer in the organisation and say, "I'm still my first clients, and I'm not sure I've done it right," and to kind of offload that kind of experience. when you're working on your own at home, you don't have that kind of supportive network around you. So I would say if you are going into practice for the first time, or you're very new into practice, it may be worth having a peer or a colleague, or even maybe the practice manager may be able to help you out, just to meet up after the session, just to kind of decompress a little bit. Because I think that if you're a student and you're just starting out, it can be quite daunting just to do that on your own. You meet up with the client, maybe on the phone, maybe face-to-face on a video platform, and then it ends. I think it might be useful to have some decompression time, maybe arrange to speak with a peer or maybe your practice manager if they've got time, and just to kind of debrief that. I think that'll be very, very useful for a lot of people.
We started the digital counselling revolution some time ago, kind of when we went into lockdown across the world, where we recognized that more technology-based counselling would be used. And it's really interesting, Rory, over the different episodes, how different it actually is. And it's the unseen differences. It's the things, what is it? You don't know what you don't know.
Yes.
It's the stuff that is outside of awareness that makes such a big difference in how we service and present ourselves and how we show up for our clients. And if you're listening to this and you would like to get more information on our formal certificate training course on online and telephone counselling, the place to go is counsellingtutor.com. It's a really, really comprehensive course that walks through the A to Z of working safely, ethically, online. And of course, there is a section in there on self-care for you as a counsellor. So there we have it. That was our digital counselling revolution. Now into practice matters, where we take a topic or subject that comes from practice, something that we might come across. And here's one that I think is of interest to anyone. If you're a student, even if you're a 25-year veteran of counselling practice, this is going to be interesting. And if you have, the longer you've been in practice, the more you're going to recognize this and start nodding your head when you hear this subject. And it's hard to help clients.
Practice matters.
Well, I think we've all, maybe some of you haven't yet encountered a client that on the face of it is hard to help. And I think even the term is a bit uncomfortable to say, because most therapists would say that given the right approach and the right therapist, that every client can be helped. But the fact of the matter is that you will meet clients in your journey through counselling who are difficult to help. They may actually come in and say, I've seen a lot of therapists and none of them have been able to help me. And I'm not sure you can too. And if that's the first interaction you have on the very first session, it certainly sets the expectations to quite a high bar. And I think in cases like that, it's useful to think about a few strategic questions that you can ask clients to get a sense of what their experience of therapy has been, and maybe discussing about what help looks like. I think in times I've worked with clients who've said, I'm not sure you'll be able to help me. One of the questions I've asked is, well, what would that help look like? If you effectively had a magic wand, what would that help look like? Give me an idea of what you need. And of course, that is very much in the realms of counselling. You're asking you're trying to explore the client's frame of reference. And in cases like that, it's been very, very interesting. Sometimes clients want to be heard. I think we put a lot of stock in, sometimes with interventions, trying to help clients, reflecting and paraphrasing. But I've met clients who just want to be heard. And I can remember somebody saying to me on the instigation of the first session, I hope you can help me, because I've had two therapists. One talked at me consistently and the other just sat and stared at me. So I said, well, if that happens in our sessions, maybe you could tell me. But it sounds to me like your earlier experience of therapy hasn't been as you would have wanted it. And sometimes we talked about immediacy earlier in the episode. Sometimes it is about having that conversation. I think there's some other useful things you can help with clients who may come in and say, I've had a lot of therapy, none of it's been really useful. Try to find out what wasn't useful and what was. I think sometimes curiosity and saying to clients, so what worked for you? And it's usually the case in my experience that what worked in the past will probably work again. If someone's used a strategy or something has been helpful, it may very well be helpful again.
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic, hard to help clients. I reckon we could probably do a whole podcast episode on it, Rory. There's that much depth to it. So my experience in hard to help clients is that sometimes, in fact, most times for myself, and this is just my own experience, the hard to help part only gets noticed a few sessions in. It might be session 2 or session 3 where you start to maybe feel from a counsellor point of view that there's a wall here. We're not getting anywhere. There's a blockage in this. And within that kind of situation, what we can tend to do is look to ourselves as counsellors. What do I do here? How do I work with this client now? What's going on here? And I think the first point is to start off, what may be causing this kind of presentation from a client? And as you've already mentioned, Rory, somebody coming in, that they can be coming in from a defeatist position. I worked in recovery, drug and alcohol recovery for some years while I was doing my counselling training. And what we tended to see there were clients that were kind of regular visitors in many different services. And listening to their stories, so often they had felt let down multiple times over by many different services, and going back even in their own personal lives, they may have been let down by their own family and those that surround them and were there to love, or should be there to love and nurture them. They've just been let down their whole life. So it's no wonder that they might come into counselling looking for some help, looking for something to end the pain, but going, they're probably going to let me down again. This is probably not going to work. And coming in with that self-defeatist mindset just coming in. And that may not show in that first session. You may just be hearing rehearsed material. You may just be hearing the narrative of the story, the road that person may have walked, but underlying that is the person who's been let down so often. And I think the first thing to do when picking up that wall, when recognizing that blockage within a counseling session, is to go to compassion and go to acceptance and go to non-judgment and that's one of the cores of counseling, that counseling love that we can that give off, and just be there with that person, not having to fix them, not having to get them to go to the right material to be able to move on. And it just gives us a break as a counsellor to go, it's okay for me to just sit lovingly with this person and really trying to understand how it might be for them. We don't know the history. And this is why, Rory and I speak about assessment so often. It's so important, assessment. Right at that front, before a client is entering into therapy, one of the questions, a common assessment question is, have you been in therapy before? And if a client has maybe been in therapy 3, 4, 6 times before, there's an opportunity to start exploring what that looks like for that client. And you've kind of given a flavor of what that might look like, Rory, in terms of the example that you used there. Clients may be in domestic violence situation where they're being criticized and brought down, where their self-esteem is so low, where there's just little left of them. And there it's about patience and being there with them and building them up. There's so much to take into consideration. There is the attachment style of that client. Do they come in and just expect to fail? Do they come in and expect that you are going to fail them? And that goes right into attachment style. So these are reasons that we can look for. But I guess at the end of the day, it's how do we work with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And you've absolutely hit the nail on the head there, Ken. It is about our compassion. It is about our non-judgmental approach. about our waiting and wanting to work with the client and being ourselves. And I think one area that sometimes, therapists, may not consider is that clients may not want to burden us with their material. They may very well be frightened that what they tell us may impact us as it has impacted them. And there can be a bit of a standoff, a bit of an impasse, where clients are checking you out to make sure that you're, not to put too fine a point on it, tough enough to be able to hear the material.
Yep.
And I've come across that, and I've actually had clients who've said, "I'm going to tell you about a lot of things that are very scary and horrible, and I hope that you can bear it." And I think that sometimes that's the reality of it, that they think that by telling you, they're going to burden you with their issues. And it's about working with that, about saying to the client, I really hear that, and I thank you for thinking of me, but I'm here for you. And I want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear it. And sometimes that can take a resistant client from resistance to all of a sudden the floodgates open and all the material comes, all the story comes, and with that the pain and the fear and the low self-esteem that the client's been carrying around. So don't underestimate the fact that, as I say, clients may not want to burden you.
Yeah. And it's patience, it's real care, wanting to be there, fully accepting that person for who they are, and involving them in the ownership of their therapy. What are their expectations of therapy? How do they prefer to work? And working with them to kind of find their own way. We're not there to give them the answers. We know that. We haven't got the big red book of counselling answers that if a client presents with something, you turn to page 62 and there is written what you tell them, and then everybody's fixed and on they go. It's not for us to fix anybody. It's for us to be with them and be patient with them. And specifically when I was speaking about clients that have been in many different services, so often those services are very limited in the time that you can be there. It's in the door, you got this much time, then you're out the door again. And it may well be that you work in a service where you only have a limited amount of space. Maybe you can look, is there an opportunity to refer to somewhere where there is more space? It's sometimes it is really, really difficult, I have to say. If you work in an agency or in a situation where you are only able to give 6 sessions and you've got somebody coming in that is carrying a lifetime of baggage, burdens, been let down multiple times over, 6 sessions, not going to cut it. And if that's all you've got and there is no opportunity of referring onwards, how do you work with that person? And the only thing I can share here is with congruence and recognizing, you have got this world of baggage that you're bringing in. We only have 6 sessions. It's not possible for us to look at everything. What would you like us to really look at closely and delve deeply into? I think it's tricky. Also, when people are coming in, think about equality, diversity. Think about, would the person feel that there's maybe a chasm because of their age? Maybe you're a counsellor, you're a lot younger than a person coming in. Could they maybe feel, what do you know? You're far too young, and vice versa as well. I know that I've certainly worked with supervisees, specifically during placement and as they're taking their first steps into counselling, where they feel themselves, I'm too young, I don't know enough. I think there's so much with hard to help clients. I think there's books that can be written on this, Rory.
Absolutely, and I think it comes down in the final analysis to who you are as a person. And the personal aspect of working with the clients, showing your congruence, showing your unconditional positive regard, because it's those are the things that make you a human being in the eyes of the client. And it's ultimately counselling is about human beings. It's about 2 human beings meeting for the benefit of one. And I would always say, if you have got a client that may be struggling, or you may be struggling, is be yourself and be congruent and be real in the room and show that warmth. And hopefully the client will see that and open up.
I'd like to end with a quote, and it is, whatever the barriers to helping clients, holding on to the very optimistic notion that everybody can be helped and that everybody has the capacity to change, I think is really useful. Sometimes it's more than just an optimistic frame of mind. It really can be a life belt where you're struggling in the sea of hard to help clients. And that quote is from Counselling Theory in Practice, a student guide by Rory Lees Oakes. Thanks for that book, Rory. If you're interested in Rory's book, go to counsellingtutor.com. There's a link just on our shop section. There is a link there. And of course, we have loads of resources on hard to help clients, including a lecture on hard to help clients as well, for qualified practitioner in our CPD library. And if you're interested in the Counselling Tutor CPD library, you can get more information on that at counsellingtutor.com.
Yes, well, it's been an interesting walkthrough episode. We started about developing the skill of immediacy, and then we went on to self-care when working online, and finally we looked at working with maybe resistant or harder to help clients. And as always, stay grounded, stay safe, and hey, why not join the digital counselling revolution?
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.